I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
Queen Camilla believed the morning meeting concerned a routine adjustment to the autumn royal calendar. Instead, she was handed a decision that quietly stripped away one of the most personal signs of her authority. King Charles had assigned Princess Anne direct oversight of Camilla's palace schedule, including her engagements, travel approvals, private audiences, and access to ceremonial events. The announcement was brief. The consequences were enormous, and Camilla's stunned silence revealed that she had never seen it coming. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla read the opening paragraph twice. She sat with Charles, Anne, and one secretary, yet the silence felt crowded with judgment. The palace schedule was more than appointments. It was the official record deciding where a royal appeared, whom they met, and which duties carried the crown's approval. Now Anne could approve, rearrange, or cancel every engagement placed before the queen consort. Charles watched his wife lower the directive. He had extended the order beyond public appearances. Receptions, charitable visits, travel plans, ceremonial seating, and private audiences connected to royal duty would pass through his sister before reaching him. Camilla's office could prepare requests, but it could no longer confirm commitments. Control of the calendar meant control of visibility, influence, and access. Camilla finally looked at the king. Confusion hardened into humiliation as she asked whether he no longer trusted her judgment. Charles did not answer. He glanced toward Anne, and that hesitation cut deeper than accusation. The monarch had defended his wife through years of scrutiny, yet he could not offer the reassurance she expected. Anne remained rigid. She did not smile or claim victory. The princess understood that this authority placed her between her brother and wife, turning every cancellation into a wound. When she finally spoke, her voice stayed level. The arrangement, she said, would begin immediately. Camilla noticed the signature date. Charles had approved the directive the previous evening, before dining with her and speaking as though nothing changed. This was not a discussion. It was a formal notification, prepared in silence after the decision became final. Camilla rose without another question. Anne stayed behind as Charles remained seated, and the door closed between wife and siblings. The queen consort understood that the deepest injury might not be the authority taken from her, but the conversation continuing in her absence. But to understand why Charles placed his sister above his wife, the people caught inside this struggle must first be understood not as royal titles, but as three individuals carrying years of loyalty, resentment, and fear into the same room. This was never simply a dispute over appointments and ceremonial appearances. For Camilla, control of her schedule represented acceptance after decades of public judgment. For Anne, duty had always mattered more than affection, comfort, or popularity. And for Charles, the decision forced two powerful loyalties into direct collision. One woman had stood beside him through scandal and survival. The other had defended the crown since childhood. Now he had chosen which of them he trusted to protect it. Camilla sat alone after the meeting, staring at a calendar filled with engagements she had fought to build. Her official schedule was not merely a list of appearances. It was proof that the queen consort remained a working senior royal, meaning a leading member of the family trusted to represent the crown through public duties. Each charity visit, reception, and private meeting confirmed that she had influence beyond her marriage to the king. Camilla picked up a pen and circled a reception supporting victims of domestic abuse, an event she had personally championed. Then she stopped. The circle remained unfinished, as she remembered that Anne could now move, reduce, or cancel it. Slowly, she drew a line through the mark. The gesture was small, but the fear behind it was enormous. She suspected this new arrangement was not about better organization. She feared it was the beginning of her disappearance. Anne carried a very different burden. The princess had built her entire life around discipline, rarely canceling duties and refusing to turn royal service into personal theater. She believed an engagement mattered only when it served the public, not when it strengthened someone's image. Yet she also knew that every decision she made would now be judged as a move against her brother's wife. Charles retreated to his study, but the silence offered no relief. The king opened a drawer and found an old photograph of himself with Anne as children. He held it for several seconds, remembering the sister who had never abandoned duty, even when duty demanded sacrifice. Then he turned the photograph face down. Choosing her judgment had cost him more than he was prepared to admit. Anne's concern reached far beyond overbooking. She believed Camilla's office had been using royal engagements to create a separate circle of loyalty around the queen consort, drawing staff, donors, and influential guests closer to her personal authority. That possibility threatened the palace because divided loyalties could turn one household into competing courts. Camilla understood that danger, but she saw another one. She imagined Anne removing one appearance after another until her role became ceremonial, limited, and replaceable. The relationship between the two women had not broken in a single morning. One specific incident had pushed years of tension beyond repair. That incident began beneath chandeliers and polite applause, but it ended with an empty chair, an altered procession, and a warning Anne delivered directly to her brother. Weeks before Camilla lost control of her schedule, a private conflict erupted during preparations for the royal service of national duty at St. George's Hall. What appeared to be a minor change in the order of arrival became the moment everything shifted. Camilla's office moved her entrance ahead of Anne's without receiving the king's final approval. The princess discovered the alteration only minutes before the procession began. She said nothing in public, but behind closed doors, she delivered a warning Charles could not dismiss. Anne had spent months helping shape the ceremony. The Royal Service of National Duty was a formal palace event created to honor military families, emergency workers, and long-serving charitable volunteers. She had been assigned to lead the main recognition segment, a role that carried meaning because many of those guests had worked with her charities for years. Anne entered the preparation room expecting a final briefing. Instead, an equerry handed her a revised schedule. The princess read the page once, then again. Her arrival had been moved back. Her presentation had been shortened. Camilla's greeting line and speech now came first. She removed her glasses and asked one question. Who authorized this? No one answered clearly. Camilla arrived moments later and immediately felt the tension. The queen consort explained that Charles might become tired and that the procession needed to move faster. Anne did not accept it. She told her that concern for the king's health did not explain why her entire role had been reduced without discussion. The words stayed calm, but the accusation beneath them was unmistakable. Camilla refused to reverse the change. She turned to the event coordinator and instructed him to follow the new order. That decision became the point of no return. Anne stepped aside and allowed the ceremony to continue, but she understood exactly what had happened. Her objection had been overruled by an office acting as though it carried its own royal command. Charles heard nothing until the evening. Anne entered his study with both schedules and placed them side by side. She showed the king how the original plan had been altered, then identified 3 earlier events where Camilla's staff had made late changes that raised her position or pushed another working royal aside. Charles resisted. He said the matter could still be handled privately. Anne answered through a documented briefing she left on his desk, warning that the next unauthorized change might create a public constitutional embarrassment, not merely a family quarrel. Charles tried to contain the damage quietly, but when Camilla learned Anne had presented evidence against her, private suspicion erupted into the confrontation both women had been avoiding. The confrontation took place without secretaries, aides, or courtiers to soften the words. Camilla entered Anne's sitting room carrying the new scheduling order and placed it sharply on the table between them. She accused the princess of turning a ceremonial disagreement into an attack on her marriage. Anne did not raise her voice. She did something far more unsettling. She looked directly at the queen consort and said the decision had become necessary because trust inside the palace had already been broken. Camilla had demanded the meeting within hours of receiving Charles's order. She refused Anne's suggestion that they wait until emotions cooled, insisting that her dignity could not be postponed. Anne agreed to meet alone, because she did not want two royal offices building separate records of the same family dispute. A royal office was the staff team managing a senior family member's duties, correspondence, and public work. She removed the briefing folders from the table. This would be personal. Camilla leaned forward and asked whether Anne had always believed she was unworthy of her position. Her voice remained controlled at first. Then she spoke about the years of public judgment, the hostility, and the effort required to earn acceptance beside Charles. The queen consort's words began to tremble, because the order felt like proof that none of that struggle had secured her place. Anne did not retreat. She told Camilla that the dispute had nothing to do with old scandal, and everything to do with present conduct. Charles's affection, she said, could not become protection from rules that every other working royal had to obey. The princess had accepted restrictions throughout her life. She would not ignore them simply because her brother's wife found them painful. Camilla demanded the truth. What exactly had Anne told the king? The princess answered through the documented account she had personally placed on Charles's desk. It described months of unauthorized changes, private invitations, altered arrival orders, and ceremonial rearrangements that repeatedly strengthened Camilla's position. Anne then delivered the blow Camilla was not prepared to hear. Charles had not accepted the recommendation immediately. He had reviewed the evidence alone, questioned senior staff, and expanded the restrictions himself. The original proposal focused on public engagements. The king added travel approvals and private royal audiences, meaning official meetings connected to crown business. Camilla's anger changed direction. Anne may have opened the door, but Charles had walked through it and locked it behind him. He had dined with her after signing the order and allowed her to believe their marriage remained untouched. Yet the decision was larger than one argument between two women, because behind Charles's signature stood a deeper palace struggle over who could command staff, shape appearances, and speak with the authority of the crown. Royal power rarely announces itself through shouting. It appears in altered access lists, withheld approvals, reassigned staff, and signatures placed at the bottom of carefully worded instructions. Charles's order was not created in a burst of anger. It emerged from a private review of how Camilla's office had been operating, and from a growing fear that two competing centers of authority were forming inside the palace. At the heart of that review sat the king, increasingly weary and forced to choose control over comfort. Charles examined months of event records, tracing how engagements were proposed, approved, and later changed. An engagement was an official royal duty, such as a charity visit, reception, or public meeting carried out on behalf of the crown. Several adjustments described as decisions from the household had not come from the wider palace at all. They had begun inside Camilla's private office and moved forward under the weight of her name. Senior staff then gave Charles a documented account of the confusion spreading through the palace. Some employees followed instructions from the king's office. Others believed a request linked to Camilla could skip the usual approval process. That uncertainty mattered, because a royal household could not function with two chains of command. One mistake could embarrass the family. A pattern could weaken the crown itself. Charles remained at his desk long after midnight. The king removed his reading glasses and pressed his fingers against his eyes, knowing exactly what correction would cost. He had spent years defending his wife against public judgment. Now he was preparing an order that might expose her to fresh humiliation. William entered quietly for a private conversation with his father. The prince did not demand punishment, and he did not attack Camilla. He warned that unclear authority would become dangerous during any future transition, meaning the period when royal duties and control gradually pass from one sovereign to the next. Charles heard the concern beneath every careful word. The review then uncovered something more troubling. Camilla's office had prepared a series of major appearances, positioning the Queen Consort as the principal royal host, while Charles reduced his workload. The plan had not received his full approval, yet staff had already begun treating it as settled. Charles chose Anne because she had no competing circle of influence and no desire to enlarge her own ceremonial position. Her authority was not a reward. It was a barrier placed between personal ambition and royal command. The order changed the household immediately. By the next morning, Camilla's staff received their first cancellation from Anne. The removed event was not minor. It was the reception the Queen Consort believed no one would dare touch. The palace had debated authority in private, but the first visible consequence arrived with a single phone call that left Camilla staring at an empty space on her calendar. The first test of Anne's authority came less than 24 hours after the order took effect. Camilla was scheduled to host an evening reception for cultural patrons in the palace's Grand Gallery, an event she had personally shaped for months. At 9:10 in the morning, her private secretary received a short call. The reception would be reassigned, Camilla's speech removed, and her appearance reduced to a brief greeting. The Queen Consort did not shout. She simply asked who had made the decision. Anne had reviewed the guest list before dawn. The reception was meant to support a cultural organization, meaning a public group working to protect the arts and heritage. Yet the princess found that the list had expanded far beyond that purpose. Personal associates, private donors, and figures tied closely to Camilla's social circle had been added until the charitable focus began to disappear. Anne did not cancel the evening. She changed its center. Edward would deliver the main remarks, while the organization's leaders would receive more time and attention. Camilla would still attend, but only to offer a formal welcome. The princess believed the decision preserved the event while removing the sense that it had become a private gathering built around the Queen Consort. Camilla heard the full change from her secretary while standing beside the dress selected for the reception. She touched the sleeve and stayed silent. Then she told the attendant to return it to the wardrobe. The gesture carried more pain than anger. She had spent months shaping the evening, and now her presence had been reduced to a few controlled minutes. Charles refused to reverse Anne's ruling. The king spoke with his wife briefly and told her the new system would collapse if he overturned its first decision simply because it caused pain. Camilla answered that pain was not the issue. Humiliation was. Yet he would not move. Camilla's staff reacted with panic. Several considered resigning, believing Anne's scrutiny had made their positions powerless. The Queen Consort stopped them. She warned that leaving now would make it appear they had something to hide, and she would not allow fear to become an admission of guilt. Anne then sent Camilla a handwritten note explaining every reason for the change. The princess described the expanded guest list, the shifted purpose, and the need to protect the event's public value. Her final sentence cut deepest. Royal occasions must never become private courts within the crown. Camilla read the line twice. That night, she requested a private meeting with Charles, not as Queen Consort speaking to the sovereign, but as a wife, confronting the man who had placed distance and protocol between them. With offices, titles, and advisors finally removed from the equation, Charles and Camilla were left alone to answer the question neither could escape. Had this decision protected the monarchy or broken something inside their marriage? There were no officials waiting outside with notes and no advisors preparing careful language. Charles and Camilla met alone in his private sitting room after the palace had fallen quiet. She did not bring the order, the cancelled schedule, or Anne's note. She brought only one question. Had he stopped believing in her? The king's answer did not come quickly. When it finally did, it transformed the conflict from a battle over authority into a painful reckoning between two people who had survived almost everything together. Camilla entered without being announced and closed the door herself. Charles remained standing, knowing that any attempt to answer as sovereign rather than husband would destroy what little trust remained. A sovereign was the reigning monarch, the person carrying final authority on behalf of the crown. Tonight, she did not want the monarch. She wanted the man who had once promised she would never face the storm alone. Camilla told him the schedule had never been a simple list of duties. It represented the life they had built after years of scandal, rejection, and uncertainty. Every confirmed appearance proved that she had earned a place beside him. Losing control now felt like being told that acceptance had always been temporary. Charles admitted he should have warned her before signing the directive. The king called his silence an act of cowardice, not strategy. For one brief moment, Camilla's expression softened. Then the deeper wound returned. He had still made the decision. He had still allowed her to discover it across a table with Anne watching. Charles chose honesty. He told his wife that love could not require him to ignore conduct that weakened trust among the family and staff. The words were gentle, but they offered no escape. Camilla looked away, fighting tears, because she understood the difference. He was not withdrawing affection. He was withdrawing protection from consequences. Charles then revealed through their private conversation that Anne had recommended only a 3-month review. The king had removed the end date himself. Authority would return, he said, only after trust had been clearly rebuilt. Camilla finally confessed what fear had driven her. She had pushed certain events forward because the next generation was growing stronger, more visible, and more central. She feared becoming ornamental, then unnecessary, then forgotten. Her ambition had not come only from hunger for power. It had come from terror of erasure. Charles offered one path forward. Camilla would work directly with Anne, accept every review without retaliation, and rebuild confidence through public duty. The queen consort could resist and deepen the fracture, or accept the humiliation and begin again. Camilla could have withdrawn or allowed the palace to split around her. Instead, the next morning, she stepped into Anne's office and made a choice that changed how the crisis would be seen beyond the palace walls. By sunrise, the private decision had become a national spectacle. Outside Buckingham Palace, cameras lined the pavement as broadcasters debated whether Camilla had been demoted, disciplined, or quietly removed from power. One newspaper printed a full-page image of Anne beneath the headline, "The Princess Takes Control," while Camilla's photograph appeared in the corner beside a crossed-out calendar. But behind the palace walls, the queen consort was preparing a response no commentator had predicted. She would accept Anne's authority publicly and without protest. Palace communications staff released a formal statement describing the arrangement as a measure to improve consistency, accountability, and coordination across the senior royal household. That phrase referred to the leading working members of the family and the staff who organized duties on behalf of the crown. The language sounded calm. The meaning did not. Anne now held practical control over which of Camilla's engagements moved forward. Commentators seized on every word. Some said Charles had chosen institutional order over marital loyalty. Others argued that the princess had become the real gatekeeper around the queen consort's public role. The palace had tried to present structure. The country saw punishment. A crowd gathered near the Victoria Memorial as one broadcaster announced the change live. Some applauded Anne's discipline and called the decision overdue. Others shouted that Camilla was being humiliated in public after years of service beside the king. The argument spread because the story touched something larger than one calendar. It asked whether marriage could ever stand above duty. Camilla watched the report with the sound turned low. Her secretary offered to switch off the television when the crossed-out calendar appeared again. She refused. The queen consort flinched, but she kept watching. If the country believed she had lost power, she wanted to understand exactly how that loss was being framed. Camilla then entered Anne's office, carrying her revised engagement calendar. She placed it on the desk and said she would accept the review process, but only if the princess judged every royal by the same standard. Anne agreed without hesitation. She told her that discipline meant nothing if it changed according to rank, affection, or family closeness. Anne then restored one charitable engagement after confirming that its purpose remained clear and its guest list was appropriate. The decision mattered. It proved that her authority was not designed to erase Camilla, but to stop personal influence from controlling public duty. Camilla accepted the restored event without celebration. Later, she arrived at the reassigned cultural reception without the speech she had planned. She greeted Anne calmly and took the place chosen for her. The final verdict would not be delivered through headlines or palace statements, but through the way Camilla carried herself when she entered a room no longer arranged around her authority. Camilla entered the cultural reception knowing every glance would search her face for anger, defeat, or rebellion. Anne stood near the receiving line, composed and watchful. Charles waited several steps away, carrying the visible strain of a man who had wounded someone he loved to protect something larger than both of them. Then the queen consort crossed the room, greeted the princess, and took the place assigned to her. In that restrained moment, the palace crisis reached its final emotional judgment. Edward delivered the central address under Anne's revised schedule. The speech honored the charitable leaders rather than the royal family, and the gathering kept its original purpose. A receiving line was the formal order in which guests greeted senior royals, and tonight it no longer revolved around Camilla. She offered the welcome, stepped back, and did not attempt to reclaim the attention removed from her. Charles watched the evening unfold without disruption. The king saw that no family member had been pushed aside, and no charity representative had been reduced to background importance. That mattered, because royal duty was supposed to serve the public, not become a contest for position. The order Anne had imposed now revealed its purpose through calm results rather than harsh words. Camilla waited until the final guest had left before approaching Anne. The queen consort admitted the first cancellation had felt cruel, personal, and humiliating. Then she made a harder admission. Once the private influence had been removed, the reception had become stronger. The charity had been heard. The event had stopped feeling like a court built around one person. Anne answered with equal honesty. The princess said taking authority over her brother's wife had been painful and deeply uncomfortable. She had never wanted to shame Camilla. She had wanted to prevent the household from splitting into rival centers of power, where staff, schedules, and loyalties answered to different voices. Charles joined them and ended the uncertainty. Anne's authority would remain, but Camilla would now be included in every review before a decision became final. Accountability would continue. Secrecy would not. Camilla accepted the arrangement. She did not regain complete control, but she recovered a clear path back to trust through discipline, transparency, and service. The decision was not her destruction, Anne's victory, or Charles's rejection. It was the moment the monarchy chose duty over private comfort. Camilla had believed love would shield her authority. Anne had believed service required intervention. Charles had understood that affection could never blur command. Each of them lost something, but the crown regained clarity. And when the palace doors closed that night, the verdict was complete. Camilla remained beside the king. Anne remained guardian of order, and Charles had proven that within the monarchy, love may shape the heart, but duty must govern the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.